welcome to today's Midnight Orders training session. Today we'll be going over how to search, edit, copy, and create new orders, associate inventory, and attach links to an order, as well as create multiple versions within an order. We'll also look at some documentation such as our work order reports, and towards the end of our session, we'll be looking at tracking and recording issues against orders. One other thing that we'll be touching on is a brief explanation as towards job tracking for shipment association and tracking numbers. And finally, we'll be taking a quick peek at how to get some of our information from our orders available to other areas of the system. Before we jump in, I'm going to just pop an order open really quick and refer to a couple of fields with some drop-down controls. In here, certain areas such as version status, urgency, order status, version job type, many of these fields can be controlled within the admin menu. If we look at the admin menu under estimates and orders, this is where we'll be able to control the majority of those drop-down choices. We've got the order status, which is typically reserved for the determinant of whether or not an order is considered on hold or active. Any order that's newly entered into the system or copied from a previous order or cloned out and exported from an estimate will be given the active status. The status type of active or on hold is used in a little bit of our documentation, but is not necessarily required for any functionality or logic within Midnight. We also have the order version status, which for multi-version jobs ties into the status or current progress of the particular version. And this list is commonly what you'll see as being referred to on the dynamic job board or any production reports as the current status of that particular job. Even on a single version or versionless job, those jobs are considered to be a one version job, and our reports and production boards look towards this list to determine the status of the job itself. You have other areas like the leftover instructions, which simply request information to determine what it is that you're going to do with any leftover goods, residuals if you want to ship to the client, if you want to continue to hold or destroy. And in here, along with any other field that's in our admin menu, if you wish to add a new option, then you can type in information down below. And by clicking the Save button with the checkbox equal to active, it becomes an available choice. If you need to adjust or edit any of the fields that you see, you can click the Edit button and the Save Disk button to lock that update in. And if you need to get rid of one, you can simply either edit and adjust the checkbox to an inactive state, or you can click the Delete button to remove it. If you were to remove one that you didn't mean to remove, you can see many of them in the active unchecked status. However, for the majority of our subsections, if you hit the Delete button, it does actually delete that instance. So we would always suggest editing the active status of a particular instruction or category name or any of the fields that you would be modifying, so that way you don't lose something that you didn't mean to lose. To get back to the other areas, we have choices where you can adjust information such as the job type, which refers to whether or not the job is considered what we would assume to be just a method of billing demand or purpose of the job. And we have issues, which can be tracked and associated to jobs as well, and their statuses and types can be identified and created within the issues breakout. To go one step further, you do have the ability to modify the orders that you see and don't see by deleting them. And if you were to delete an order unintentionally or somebody internally were to delete an order that wasn't meant to be deleted, you can go into the Estimate/Orders Undelete Orders submenu. And in here, you can simply check the box of any order or orders that you wish to undelete. By clicking Save and Close, you'll free those orders up and you can access them again. In addition to the other areas of order drop-down box management, we have some areas in the postage list. The mail category, mail class, mail geography, and mail sort are all data that you'll see in the data postage tab. And these populate the drop-downs for any of your shipping information. You also have your post office, your postage affixed list, your rate code, spoilage, and status, which can also be adjusted. And all of these will also be available within the drop-down section under the data postage tab. The rate codes and the estimated rates respond more to the estimate level information, but the values that are logged into an estimate and carried over into an order by adjusting any of the data from here and then hitting the export function refer to the numbers or the rates from this list. After assigning your postage rate, the postage affix would be the list in which you select your client data, your meter information, or your stamps to actually assign and break down the prices to summarize for your client what their postage expenses will be. We also have the user-defined fields list. You have the choice between editing a list for orders or order version information. If you were to adjust the order user-defined fields or create new ones, anything that you do in here would be visible under the Orders Details tab. If you were to modify anything under the Order Version UDF list, this will show up in the General Info tab. Lastly, under our global settings, you have the option to check out under Estimates and Orders some default options to determine core data that you'll see. The primary information here that refers to an order would look to something like, say, the auto update CRM info on copy, in which if you were to have a customer record with modified information, that info will update itself, more related to the shipping or billing addresses, as well as taxable information for the newly created by copy order. You also have the issue tracking email notification, which is derived from orders. So any emails sent out through midnight will default alert the email address or addresses typed in here, comma separated to get to others. And lastly, the only services associated with customer pricing or with contract pricing features can be enabled or disabled in here. By checking these boxes, these do pretty much what they say. They'll make it so only specific services will be available on any particular job at any particular time. The important thing to remember in here is that if you don't have a contract set up for a particular customer, then if you have the only services associated with contract pricing feature enabled, you may have customers with no services able to be selected. Other key areas in here are the display warning message when opening closed orders pop-up. This can be enabled or disabled just by clicking the checkbox, and anytime you enter a closed order, a user will simply be given a warning that, hey, this order is closed. Be careful making any modifications. Additionally, you can also lock the order after it's been exported from Midnight into your QuickBooks or Sage Peachtree system by having the lock order after export to accounting system box checked. What this does is it makes it so a job cannot be modified in any way after it's been pushed out to accounting. Now, if your system hasn't yet imported that document, it's still considered having been exported. So Midnight's lock feature will still prevent orders from being adjusted, even if they don't yet exist in your accounting system. There's also the control under the system list to allow you to be alerted in such a way that if you're adjusting or leaving a page and then attempting to exit after filling all of your modifications, or even a single one, you'll be prompted to save before you exit the page. This by default is checked on and it can be disabled here. And lastly, there's the reports, default BCC, and signature-based information, which can be adjusted in here. The default BCC is an email account that receives any outgoing messages from Midnight, as Midnight doesn't store the emails that are sent out, much like you may expect Microsoft Outlook to do. To continue to receive messages and prove that they are going out of Midnight, for instance, we would suggest creating an email account on your server and then having the default BCC be created in that instance, such as midnight@yourorganisationname.com. That way, when invoices are going out to clients, you have a track record of documentation that is leaving the system. The default email signature is global. It is not user-based. So in preparing a signature for your company, make sure to include any images, phone numbers, contact information, and naming conventions that make sense to your company as a global instance. One quick thing before we leave, the company settings give you some pretty interesting information to set up as your default records. The licensee info that you see here, address 1, city, state, zip, will show up on your invoices as the return address by default if you have any areas referring to that information. You'll also have your report logo. This file here refers to what you see on your estimate reports and also your invoice reports in the upper left corner of any of them. This is different from the system logo, which is what you'll see in your upper corner of any documentation of the site around the dynamic job board or just accessing the course site as a whole. This can be identified by seeing the black text on the report logo versus the white text here for the system logo. You've also got controls on the right, which identify your default company, which can be used for sales tracking. You can have multiple companies within your system, and this multiple company system can accommodate for different logos and different return address information. You can only have one default company for which to associate your customers with, though, and by checking this box, you identify them. You also have accounting integration. By clicking this, you can select your accounting package, whether it be QuickBooks, Macala, Peachtree, Great Plains, or if you just want to have your system export orders as a generic CSV document. By selecting these choices, you can fill out your information like your accounts receivable and payable accounts and covering any other details related to the import process required for this particular accounting software of choice. You have the edit order number checkbox, which allows you to, well, edit the order number of any job that you're in. This would be identified on the order screen as the ref number and will be available in the details tab. You also have logic to control the system's automatic deduction of inventory on a job based on whether the job is considered as shipped or if the shipped date is populated in the header, if the close date is populated in the header, or if the versions checkbox is clicked within the inventory tab of any given order that has inventory associated. And finally, the display total services and tax on estimates and orders is the general pricing container that you'll see on the upper right-hand corner of your orders screen. And the CPM is the same thing, the cost per piece ignoring tax. I'm sorry, the cost per thousand ignoring tax. This can be enabled or disabled as need be. So I go into the orders search screen. Then anything that's associated in here can be searched for regarding open or closed orders. By utilizing the extended search, you can search for other information that you don't see on your general search, such as your expected quantity. You can search by a date range, a quantity range rather than a core value. The same thing goes with your date ranges, such as your order date or your order date of entry, your due date and your close date, and your user-defined fields, which refer to your order UDFs. If they exist, can be searched for in here as well. If you need to search for closed orders, you do need to open this extended search and click the closed orders checkbox. And if you wish to see all versions of any multi-version orders, then you can click this checkbox too. And after clicking submit, your view will show you all the information you need to know. For instance, your closed orders, and in the case of multi-version jobs, all of your versions with a version name. If you need to reset these, you can uncheck the boxes and click submit. And if you do anything in your core search section, such as adjust the order numbers and click and modify your date range by ascending or descending order, for instance, to reset this, you can click reset filters to reset the sorting options and click the clear filters checkbox to remove any of the choices that you've plugged in here to filter your data by. The filter funnel buttons that you see here can be adjusted in such a way so that way you can change what you're searching for. By default, many of our fields here refer to a begins with. The customer name defaults to a contains option. So you can adjust these to be able to bring up what it is that you're looking for without necessarily having to pick and choose or define yourself to one method of search. If you need to get into an order, you can of course click it, or if you happen to have been accessing older orders, you can expand the recently visited orders list. This is a user-based storage list that will show the most recent 10 orders that you, or at least your user account, has accessed. This is convenient for users that jump from computer to computer or access different internet levels on a laptop or frequently clear their cache records and security information, because this info is stored to their Midnight account rather than your PC's account. So I'll jump into an order, a pre-existing one rather than a new one. And if we do take a quick look at analyzing our order screen, we can see that pretty much all the info under here is almost identical to what we saw in the estimates screen. You can view the estimates video or training section to go over some of those ideas. In short, though, you won't have quite the same info. For instance, you'll have a attachments tab here at the top, which refers to your versions-based attachments. You'll have a shipping tab, which allows you to determine what the address is for shipping and billing, as well as the option to pick and choose multiple shipping locations or plug in tracking numbers. You'll have the details tab, which allows you to break out specific information on the order itself. This is what you're used to seeing in the estimate screen versus the general info tabs, version-based information, which is still related to what you'll see on most jobs, especially if you're running zero version jobs. And you have the versions tab, which refers to any or all versions that an order has. The version name that you see here normally populates when you plug in a job name in the project field. Any modifications that you make in here automatically adjust the version name, which will subsequently update the version name for a version within the versions tab as you save the job to commit that. The expected quantity here behaves just as it does in the estimate screen for when you create a new one. Any services that you add to the system that have a price of $1 or less will update their quantity to match this expected quantity count. And if you run the update quantity, any quantities of the expected quantity instance will adjust to the quantity that you have here after clicking update. When doing this, you will be asked if you want to recalculate your prices. This is extremely important to pay attention to. Yes, we'll recalculate all of your pricing options. It will look at customer information and any changes that have been made since the addition of the order being added or the customer being modified. If you click no, it simply keeps the unit prices as what they originally were and updates the total line item price based on the updated quantity only. Every value under the update quantity is considered a user-defined field, and these, of course, can be adjusted in the admin list. Under the Details tab, every value underneath the Copied from Order row is considered a user-defined field and is modified under the Orders list. The prepay option, which is something that can be defaulted on a customer level or job level, determines whether or not an order can be exported from Midnight and pushed into your alternative accounting package before it is closed. And once it is pushed out of Midnight, it is given an AR export date, which shows the date and time that it was pushed out. This will update any of your accounting-based reports in Midnight to let you know that something has been pushed out and any information associated with it, such as core pricing or GLID breakouts. And you'll also see if the order was copied from another order or if it was exported out from an estimate. As we identified in the global settings, we also have the ref number, which is the order's number, and this can be adjusted as needed. And if we need to push this back to an estimate, we can click the Estimate Export button to throw it back to the estimate screen, which is practical for cases in which you've either built the estimate as an order, perhaps unintentionally, or if you need to get back into the estimates to run a multiple quantity instance for documentation and requoting a customer after, say, a period of time of inactivity. Finally, the entered by defaults to the user that created the order. And any modifications made since then can be adjusted or viewed under the quick links, under the audit log, on a job that's considered modified, you are prompted and required to save your changes before viewing. Once you view the audit log, you can see who it was that created the job and what time they did, which is relative to your current time zone, who it was that had jumped in to read it and when, and any time that a user has gone in to update the record. This is especially useful to track if something were to change on a job unintentionally or unexpectedly. You can look in here and see who it was that had accessed the order to make sure that you're talking to the right people about why your data may have changed. A couple of other fields. We have the Infos Comments tab down here. What you see in this info comments is what you'll have printed on any sort of work order documentation. what you have under the Details tab is an invoice comments section, which is set to only print on any of your invoices. There's about 12 or 13 default invoices. The invoice does not include the postage prepay invoice in this case. The General Info tab's comments show up on the default 5 work orders or any custom ones built from there. Now, something else different from here compared to the estimate screen is the inclusion of a drops tab. Under here, you can have a job that has multiple drops associated with it. If you plug a date in, the due date, or if you have an estimate with a date that's already entered and you convert it to an order, once it's saved, you'll be given one drop date with a quantity that matches your expected quantity. This is what drives the logic in our dynamic job board reports, as everything from there is determined by how many drops are on a job that has a drop date. In here, you can create more just by simply adding more and adjusting the quantities to match what they need to be. The complete checkboxes here identify whether or not the services associated with the job have yet to be scheduled and completed. If all services are completed in the production screens using our shop floor app or the dynamic job board, these checkboxes check themselves. Alternatively, you can check these yourself to mark everything for that job as complete to pull them off of your reports. If optional, you can plug in a drop or ship date for each particular job. These do not retroactively update the shipped date that's in the order header, which assumes a single drop. We also have the postage tab, which is a little bit different from the postage tab in the estimate screen. In the estimate screen, your postage tab looked more like the data postage tab, which had the options for sortation, some data processing info. The postage tab here allows you to pick and choose your permits, your meters, your stamps, etc., which you can plug in also their method of classification, the date that they're assigned to go out, and the rates that are associated at time of actual mailing. This can give you your total for postage, and for each line that's here, you're summing into a postage used total, which is what your customers billed for in terms of postage. Anything under here shows up on your invoices broken out line by line, and also on your expense reports for any expenses related to postage if you end up covering these yourself. Lastly, if you have any escrow assigned to the customer or wish to pay for the postage instances, you can look at the current balances here. The escrow, of course, is the money that's assigned to a particular customer record and available for use on any job. You can also have earmarked funds, which are pretty much the same as escrow. These are funds that are applied to a specific job. For instance, if a customer sends you a check and you associate that check with, in this case, order 40579, those funds are not available for any other jobs. If you need to receive a payment from a customer, you can click the Receive Payment button. This brings you with a new screen that allows you to plug in a check that's actually been received from a customer. You can pick and choose where the funds go, how much was received, and if you want it to be assigned to the specific job. In the case of here, we already have it as such. Or if you just want to place it into escrow and make it available for any job. In the case that you're prepared to actually make your payment, you can hit the Apply Funds button here, and this commits the funds either from escrow or earmarked to the job. I'll be going over more details on this in my future sessions on postage handling, but this is the core process of receiving payments. The final tab under here is the Inventory tab. Any items that are required for a specific job can be added in here, either by adding the item by clicking Add Item or by setting up a print calculator service. You can get inventory to plug into your system. When you click the Add Item, you can see a breakout of the goods that you have. When adding a new instance, your quantity needed will always default to the assumed expected quantity, which is what you have set in your Info tab. You can see how much you need, how much you have on hand, and how much is reserved on the entirety of the job itself. In this case, if I were to do 2 batches of number 10 envelopes, because I'm doing 2 drops, you'll see my reserve count jumps to 2,000. This is not 2 sets of 2,000. This is 1 set of 2,000 because it's summing this 1,000 and this 1,000 together. And it will also look at quantity needed across other versions of the job to let you know if you have more needed for this particular job. When preparing to deduct inventory, you can click the deduct checkbox if the version box is checked within the global settings. This brings up a container that will allow you to pick and choose what it is that you're deducting and where you're pulling it from if you have any in stock. So you'll see we have 2 items, but only one appears here. That's because we only have goods for this one item, the number 10 envelopes. The location defaults to the first in, first out received location. In this case, it has our receiving as the default pull, and this can be adjusted as need be. There's a few other options that we have under our quick links too, especially under orders that we didn't have in estimates. We have the ability to mark an issue against a job. In here under issue tracking is where you do such. And in this case, what you would do is select any of the services that you'd like to mark your issue against, associate any other information tied to it, and you can mark expenses related to those particular issues. You can close the issues once they're confirmed as being associated with the job and tracked for properly. I typically wouldn't do this until you've already closed your job or resolved the issue, for instance, a machine issue. And the money that's associated here gets tied as a job expense for any of your detailed tracking reports and profitability reports. Another thing you can do from here is under the quick links, convert your services from inventory by clicking the copy inventory to services list. You give yourself just that. Depending on how the services are set to appear, they'll export underneath, I believe, the print department to indicate any expenses associated. And lastly, under here, you have your group billing, which can be adjusted and set up in a way to let you pick and choose how your pricing in the system for a particular order is established. And here, for instance, you can create your various groups. We'll say printing and mailing. You can pick and choose what gets associated with what department. And when we hit the refresh button, we're given an invoice, which lets us know what our pricing is, either based on quantity or based on a specific unit of measure, which modifies the cost accordingly. If you check this out in our invoice group billing, you can see how that breaks out. Now, if we're happy with our estimate and we want to mark it as converted to an order, we can always hit the export estimate button, and after that, we're continuing to be satisfied with our order. We can mark it as closed by simply clicking and assigning a close date. Again, any inventory deduction logic that you have associated from your global settings list will continue to occur here. So be careful when handling inventory deductions, as if you do it manually, you'll also be prompted to do it a second time when applying close date. And after your job's been closed, if you exit the order, you can go into your quick links in the order search screen, access your accounting export list, and you'll see the not yet exported instance of the job that you were just in. So from here, if I check this box and click the Save and Close button, I can export an instance of my job out to a file that's compatible with my QuickBooks. To review it, you can always open it straight from here, or you can just go into your QuickBooks system or other accounting system and just run a file import on this file. By default, anything that you save out of Midnight goes to your default save location for Google Chrome, which is typically established as your Downloads folder. This default can be adjusted within Chrome's settings features, or there are a few extensions that allow you to pick and choose what types of files save to what location. If you download one of those extensions, just make sure you pay heed to where it is that you're saving your files, so that way you can import it properly. So if we're happy with the order that we've gone into and created, and we'd like to access it again, of course, we can use our extended search to pull it up by looking for the close dates. In here, if we need to, we can copy our job to create a new instance. Copying the job will push everything forward with the exception of date information, tracking numbers that were plugged into the shipping tab, and any postage affixed instances. Any funds that were received against a specific job, in the case of 40579, will not be available on this job unless they've been converted to funds in that customer's escrow record. And because we have no dates, we also have no jobs associated with them via the Drops tab, which means our production report will not yet load any data until we've plugged in some dates. In the instance that you'd want to convert this job to what we would consider a template, if you're happy with where the job is, you can modify the ref number. In this case, I would suggest simply putting a T or a T dash in the front. Once you click off, your order number is updated. And in this case, now you have what's effectively a template job that you can pull up by doing a search for any T instances. You can rename the project name and the version name to also give you any template identifiers. If we need to create another version of our job, cases for this may include having your postage information on one version and your printing information or sales information on another, or perhaps you're doing several batches of this job, one for every week of the month of February, for instance. To create a new version, you can either type in down below the new version info with a new quantity, new date if required, and save it to commit it. You'll see you're given a pop-up if you lack a date that lets you know that you won't have any schedulable services until you plug in a date. Alternatively, you can copy the version by clicking the copy button, the green plus button, for that particular row. The new version, if you were to create a new one, has no service information, no pricing information, no inventory information or postage information. If you were to copy, then you would carry all that info forward. You can also give your copied version its new name, quantity, and date if necessary. We're immediately brought into our new version and can from here adjust any postage information, billing information related to services, or even the core quantity info by looking at the Info tab's quantity details here. Under the Details tab, remember that this is the core order information. So anything that you see here, such as job progress, leftovers to ship, the user-defined fields that we've created ourselves, the core user who created the job, and the job number itself are all visible here, along with the expected quantity, which is the sum of the quantities of all versions in this case. So 1600 as identified by the sum under here. To remove a version, you can simply click the delete button of a version that you're not in, reminding yourself that you cannot delete the suffix 0 or the first version. And again, to clarify, the ref number that you see here to adjust any of the order number information is a global feature that allows you to adjust the order number. And if you change the order number in any version, it changes it for what you consider to be all versions. Lastly, here under the Shipping tab, you have the ability to pick and choose your default locations for billing and shipping. For each contact that you select, you can pull in the address information for that particular contact. You can also free type in these fields if necessary. Your invoices will reflect the default bill to data that you see here as the location for which to send an invoice to. And any shipping reports will look to this Ship tab, packing slips and otherwise to refer to that information. Under shipment tracking, if you click this, you'll be given a pop-out which allows you to plug in your tracking numbers as well as your carrier information and your costs, so that way you can track your expenses of shipping. And then your profitability reports and detail reports will show the shipping information. So that way you can track and confirm in case your customer were to call back and request more information, or if you need to just track your expenses as detailedly as possible. If you update your customer record, the global setting that we had to auto update CRM info on copy will automatically adjust this information to match based on the CRM's default instance of customers shipped to and billed to information. We'll take a quick peek at our job tickets now, our work order, for instance. This will show us some of our broken out detailed information on what needs to be done. In here, you'll have a breakout of any postage information if your data postage tab has detailed info. You also have your print estimation service info broken out into blocks with contained item information and quantity related info if you have that item in stock. And you also have a departmental split on any of your services that need to be done on your particular job, as well as a final block of all required inventory and locations in which that inventory can be acquired. We do have different versions of our work order. For instance, if you were to open a work order department, you'd see a departmental split on each work order's department, design, data, print, etc. The work order versions will allow you to see each task broken out by version. The work order print and work order advanced show just print estimating information, but in a different method. We also have our invoice reports, which show out pricing differently, either our invoice basic or invoice, which don't show any costing information except for the total. The group billing, which we established as being able to create our own groups. The invoice price, which shows the prices of each of our services. The invoice single version, which shows the prices of one of our versions that we're in, or the invoice version price, which breaks out the details of our entire job's expenses broken out by version. Other reports in here like packing slips, poll tickets, purchase orders, and shipping locations mostly respond to either the inventory or the shipping information within the shipping tab. And if you don't wish to have all of these reports visible, you can adjust their presence in the system by going into your admin menu, entering your report objects list, and adjusting the status of the reports themselves so that way either the name of the report is different. For instance, my block batch invoice here, if I need to change the name, I could just change the display name to have it appear differently on screen. Or I could remove it entirely by clicking the active checkbox to off. By default, you should have most of the invoices that we saw on the screen. It is possible that some of them may be disabled for you. If you'd like to check and see if you have any reports that you didn't see on my screen, you can do a search for reports under the active no status under the report objects list. And if you see a report under here that looks like one that you'd like to either turn on or take advantage of, you can adjust it by hitting the edit button and turning that report on by checking the active box. Lastly, when preparing to send off your documentation to your customers, the report name by default is what you'll have your document called. So in the case of this one, your NB work order .pdf would be the file name. If you wish to change that, you can edit the attached file as name, so that way the name of the file that's actually sent will change to reflect the proper name for what it is that you require. Common cases for this include adjusting the invoices. We have quite a few invoices, and unfortunately, their names may not match up for what you require. For instance, you may not need your customer to see that your invoice group billing is titled invoice group billing. So you could simply adjust that part so it just says invoice. Now the sent PDF will be titled invoice.pdf. Jumping back into our job that we created before, if we open up the invoice, we can actually email it out to any of the contacts associated with the customer. I'll open up the the invoice price just to illustrate this. By clicking the email button, you can pick and choose who you are, having it default to the default account for your business email account, and the customer's default contact with the default email address for their record. We can see our attached file of the invoice is already here. And if you need to select another attachment, such as a proof, if you wanted to send one back to the client, you can click Choose File and select any others that are necessary. Once you click Submit, you've officially sent your email, and it's gone through and can be tracked in the customer record as having been sent. Although without the BCC default, you won't have a record of the email's contents or other attachments. Here's the received email that the customer will see. And when they double click the file that's attached, it'll open up in their PDF program to show them exactly what they'd expect to see. The last areas I'd like to go over are under the Reports module. Under here, we have access to job costing reports, which tie information from sales and expenses to let us know what our total profitability is. We also have access to the production reports, such as the drops scheduled version or production schedule reports, to let us know what our actual detailed info is that needs to be done on a job. The drops scheduled by version lets you see what actually needs to go out the door, defaulting to today. The drops actual version lets you compare shipments based on timeframes. This is a great report to track productivity and see what jobs are being sent out at reasonable times, what jobs are being sent out late, early, and if they're closed or not. Other reports like your schedules can show you mass information of all services that need to be done on a particular job and how, or what needs yet to be marked as completed via the dynamic job board, as well as some simple information to indicate work that still has to be done. Do be aware that depending on how large your system is and how many open jobs you have, you could have a lot of instances of jobs in the system. So if you need a modification to the report to hide, say, template jobs that are still marked as open but plugged in with a sample date, then we can go ahead and modify that report as needed. On your home screen, you do have access to a default production report underneath the quick links, which will let you set a specific production report to a particular user record. And each employee's production report button will load, by default, our stock production schedule or the one that you set to their account. And the information on the production report can be adjusted by pulling it off of the dynamic job board by clicking the calendar button to bring up your task view or order view of your DJB. So that way you can complete your services, which have all of their records tied straight from the order, as long as that order has a drop or at least a due date in the header to give it a start date for any services that have yet to be done. I'll have a full dedicated training session for the dynamic job board going on next week, so I'll be able to go over the intricacies of this system at a later time. That's pretty much everything for reports. So I will shut down the recording session and open everything up for Q&A.